He just wanted a coffee, and she wanted to keep her perfect world untouched. But the earth doesn't distinguish between classes, and when the countryside walked through the door of her pastry shop, everything changed. What began as prejudice blossomed into a proposal that could unite two worlds. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this. Elizabeth watched him from the terrace of her cafe, like someone studying an ancient painting. Plaid shirt, boots covered in dust, and a worn-out hat that seemed to have faced more sunny days than any other object in his life. He stopped his old truck, stepped out calmly, and even from a distance, his carefree demeanor drew looks, some curious, others judgmental. When he approached the counter and ordered a coffee, she responded with a forced smile and eyes that spoke louder than words. "You're not our kind." The Condesa neighborhood in Mexico City was known for its exclusive vibe and trendy cafes. Among them, Sweet Cinnamon stood out not just for its delicious desserts, but for the woman who ran it. Elizabeth Carter, widow of Montgomery, had transformed the small bakery inherited from her late husband into a refined chain of establishments frequented by the capital's elite. At 52, Elizabeth was seen in the neighborhood as a symbol of late-blooming elegance and sophistication. She had dedicated her life to managing her small pastry empire and took pride in maintaining a standard that, though understated, made one thing clear. She was a woman of class. When the man began frequenting the place, always on Wednesdays and Saturdays, her discomfort grew. She mentioned to Margaret, her lifelong friend, "He's just a poor ranch hand. He probably doesn't even know what a short espresso is." Margaret, more sensible, replied, "You should be more open-minded, Elizabeth. Not everyone can wear Gucci for coffee." The man, who introduced himself as Nathan Reynolds, didn't seem bothered by the disdainful looks he received. He always ordered the same thing, a traditional pot coffee and a sweet bread. He left a generous tip and treated the staff with respect, something that didn't go unnoticed by Carolyn, the shop's most experienced barista. "Mrs. Elizabeth, that Mr. Reynolds is very polite. Not like some customers who come dressed in designer clothes but treat the staff as if we were invisible," Caroline remarked one afternoon as she wiped down the tables. The first big surprise came when Nathan, ever polite, left a note on the counter. "I like your coffee and your firm way of facing the world." That puzzled Elizabeth. For the first time, she wondered if she was being too harsh, not with him, but with her own life. From that moment on, something shifted. She began to notice more. How he treated the employees, how he waited patiently, how he smiled even in the face of coldness. The second memorable event happened when he, on a rainy Saturday, brought a box of oranges from his orchard to the cafe. "The best of the season," he said, leaving them at the door without waiting for thanks. The action divided opinions. Some considered it romantic, others invasive. Elizabeth, however, was moved. It was a gesture from someone who asked for nothing in return. "You should give him a chance," Margaret insisted during their weekly lunch at the trendy restaurant in Polanco. "You've been alone too long, and if the man has good manners, what does it matter if he's from the countryside?" "Don't start with your soap opera ideas," Elizabeth replied. But the truth was, she no longer saw Nathan the same way. There was something about his authenticity that contrasted with the superficiality of her usual social circle. One Wednesday, as Nathan was getting ready to leave, Elizabeth gathered her courage and approached his table. "The oranges were delicious. We used them to make a cake that sold very well," she remarked, trying to sound casual. "I'm glad," he replied with a genuine smile. "I have plenty more, and not just oranges. My land yields good fruit." There was an awkward silence before Elizabeth dared to ask, "Where exactly is your ranch located?" "On the outskirts of Bravo Valley." "It's a peaceful place, far from the noise of the city. You should visit sometime. It would do you good to rest." The invitation hung in the air, and though Elizabeth didn't respond right away, the idea began to take root in her mind. She even recounted the exchange to her daughter Sophia during their weekly phone call. "You? On a ranch?" Sophia laughed. From Los Angeles, where she worked as an architect. "Mom, you suffer if you have to walk more than 2 blocks without your Louboutin heels." "Don't be dramatic," Elizabeth protested. "I just said he invited me, not that I would go." But the seed was planted. After weeks of indecision, Elizabeth finally accepted the invitation, more out of curiosity than romantic interest. It would just be a day trip, she told herself. Nothing serious, nothing binding. On the agreed day, Nathan came to pick her up in his truck, which, though old, was impeccably clean. The 2-hour journey to Bravo Valley was filled with surprisingly engaging conversations. Nathan knew the region like the back of his hand and spoke passionately about sustainable agriculture and rural development. "How do you know so much about these topics?" asked Elizabeth, intrigued by his evident expertise. "Life teaches you, Mrs. Elizabeth, and so do books," he replied, with an enigmatic smile that only deepened her curiosity. When they finally arrived at what she expected to be a modest plot of land, Elizabeth couldn't hide her astonishment. Before her stretched a tree-lined path leading up a hillside, and at the summit, a view that would forever change her perception of Nathan Reynolds. The road wound through ancient trees until it reached the top of the hill. When the truck stopped, Elizabeth held her breath. Before her unfolded a sight she could never have imagined. The so-called small plot was, in reality, a property spanning over 100 hectares, with vast crops organized in terraces descending. Down the slope, modern irrigation systems, glass greenhouses, and at the summit, a rustic yet elegant estate with wide verandas and a privileged view of Bravo Valley's lake. "Welcome to Orange Grove Estate," Nathan said simply, as if he weren't, presenting one of the most impressive properties Elizabeth had ever seen. This isn't just any ranch," she stammered, unable to hide her astonishment. "To me, it's just home," he replied, helping her down from the truck. "Come, I'll show you the place." Over the next few hours, Elizabeth discovered a completely new world. Nathan guided her through his citrus crops, showed her how the rainwater harvesting systems worked, and explained the sustainable farming projects he had implemented. The workers greeted him with genuine respect, not the kind born from fear or obligation, but the kind that comes from admiration. "How long have you been doing this?" Elizabeth asked as they walked through a greenhouse growing medicinal herbs. "Inherited a small portion from my father 20 years ago. The rest I bought little by little, reclaiming land that had been abandoned or misused." A group of young people walked past them, taking notes and asking questions to one of the foremen. "Students?" inquired Mrs. Elizabeth. "From Chapingo Autonomous University. They come every semester for fieldwork. We teach them organic farming techniques and they bring us new ideas. It's a fair exchange." The fourth big revelation came during lunch on the estate's terrace. As they enjoyed dishes prepared with ingredients from the estate itself, an older man approached to greet them. "Mr. Nathan, what a pleasure to see you. I was passing by and wanted to personally deliver the invitation for the conference in Guadalajara." "Thank you, Mr. Edward. Let me introduce you to Mrs. Guadalupe Carter." The man greeted her respectfully. "A pleasure, ma'am. I hope you can also accompany our star engineer to the conference. His soil recovery methods are revolutionizing agriculture throughout Latin America." When the man left, Elizabeth looked at Nathan with inquisitive eyes. "Star engineer?" Nathan smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I studied agricultural engineering at Chapingo and then did a PhD in California. I developed methods to restore degraded land and turn it into productive spaces. Nothing out of this world." "Nothing out of this world." Elizabeth was perplexed. "Why did you never mention it? Why do you come to my cafe dressed like this, as if you were a simple farmer?" he finished, without a trace of offense. "Because I am, Elizabeth. Titles and accolades are just paper. My true identity lies in my calloused hands and my connection to the earth. Besides, I value authenticity. In your cafe, I can just be Nathan, the man who loves spiced coffee and sweet bread." That afternoon, as they sat on the hacienda's veranda, while the sun began to set behind the mountains, Elizabeth felt deeply ashamed of her initial judgments. The words spilled out on their own. "I owe you an apology, Nathan. I judged you without knowing you by your appearance, your dirty boots, and your worn-out hat." He looked at her calmly. "What the eyes see doesn't always reveal what the heart holds." We all judge, Elizabeth, it's human. What matters is being willing to correct our judgments when we realize we're wrong. That night, during dinner in the main dining room of the estate, she met Mrs. Josephine, the housekeeper, who had raised Nathan after his mother's early passing. The elderly woman, with the wisdom that only years can bring, shared stories of young Nathan, his determination, how he had turned down million-dollar offers to work for agricultural corporations because he preferred developing projects that directly benefited local farmers. "My boy has always been like that," Mrs. Josephine said proudly. "He could live like a king, but he'd rather stay the same humble rancher his father and I raised." When Elizabeth returned to Mexico City the next day, something inside her had changed. The following weeks passed with reciprocal visits. Nathan continued frequenting the coffee shop, and she began spending weekends in Bravo Valley. The relationship blossomed naturally, built on a mutual respect that grew with every conversation, with each new discovery about one another. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. When Elizabeth decided to introduce Nathan to her circle of friends at a dinner in her Polanco penthouse, the evening turned into a disaster. Despite his education and knowledge, Nathan felt like a fish, out of water amid superficial conversations about luxury brands and society gossip. And though he tried to adapt, his authenticity clashed with the artificiality of the setting. "You need to shave that beard and get a decent suit," Elizabeth suggested before a charity event. "And maybe you should consider buying a nicer car, suitable for the city." Nathan looked at her with sadness. "Are you ashamed of me, Elizabeth?" "No, of course not," she replied quickly. "I just want you to fit better into my world." "And have you considered adjusting a little to mine?" he asked softly, but the question hung in the air like a seed of doubt. That night after the event, Nathan said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek. "I think we need time to think. Maybe we rushed things." During the next 2 weeks, Nathan didn't show up at the cafe. Elizabeth tried to distract herself with work, social gatherings, and shopping, but nothing filled the void left by that man with his worn-out hat and sincere smile. It was then that she realized she was in love, not with the prestigious engineer or the prosperous landowner, but with the genuine man who saw beauty in simplicity and value in honesty. One Sunday morning, Elizabeth looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She had grown so accustomed to her mask of perfection that she had forgotten who she truly was. With determination, she washed her face, removing the carefully applied makeup. She took off her jewelry and dressed in simple jeans and a white blouse. She grabbed her notebook of family recipes, those culinary secrets she had guarded so closely, and drove to Bravo Valley. When she arrived at Orange Grove Estate, it was raining. Nathan greeted her with surprise on the porch of the main house. "Elizabeth, what are you doing here in this storm?" Soaked and more vulnerable than she had ever shown herself before, she handed him the notebook. "I want to propose something, combining our knowledge, my pastry recipes, with your organic products. We could create something unique, authentic." Mr. Nathan took the notebook carefully, as if receiving an invaluable treasure. He invited her inside, and as they warmed themselves by the fireplace, they talked for hours about possibilities and shared dreams. He accepted the proposal, but set one condition. "I want you to be willing to live here part of the time, away from the bustle of the city. I need to know you can be happy in my world, just as I'm willing to adapt to yours." The challenge was set. Elizabeth, who had always defined her worth by her appearance and social standing, now faced the possibility of redefining herself. After careful consideration, she agreed. The following months were transformative. Together, they renovated an old structure near the main house to turn it into a rustic yet elegant cafe, Cinnamon and Earth. The news spread quickly. The renowned baker Guadalupe Carter was partnering with the celebrated agronomist Nathan Reynolds to create a unique culinary space in Bravo Valley. The opening of Cinnamon and Earth was a major event. Journalists from specialty magazines, tourists, and locals marveled at the desserts made exclusively with ingredients from the estate. The space quickly became a must-visit destination for those traveling to the region, turning the property into a culinary landmark. For Elizabeth, every day at the estate was a discovery. She learned to appreciate the silence of dawn, the hands-on work in the aromatic herb garden she had planted beside the cafe, and the satisfaction of creating with ingredients she had watched grow herself. She discovered a new purpose and a newfound peace. What was once noise had become fertile silence. Meanwhile, she continued managing her chain of bakeries in the city, dividing her time between both worlds. Her employees noticed the change. She was more relaxed, more understanding, less obsessed with appearances. Caroline, the loyal barista, remarked one day, "Mrs. Elizabeth, ever since you've been with Mr. Nathan, you seem like a different person. You look happy." The ninth great test came when Gabriel Montgomery, cousin of her late husband and a prominent real estate developer, arrived at Orange Grove Estate with a multi-million-dollar proposal to buy part of the land for an exclusive tourist resort. "Think about it, Nathan," Gabriel insisted during dinner at the estate. "With that money, you could modernize the rest of the property, expand your research, live without worries." Elizabeth watched as Nathan listened intently, seemingly considering the offer. For a moment she feared he might accept, that the money could tempt the man who had always seemed immune to material things. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially Gabriel's, she spoke up. "These lands have a value no sum can calculate. They don't just produce fruit and beauty. They produce life, knowledge, a future. They're not for sale." Nathan looked at her with a mix of pride and love. Gabriel, bewildered by the intervention of someone he'd expected to be his ally, tried to insist, but the decision was final. "I'm sorry, Gabriel," said Nathan firmly. "As Elizabeth said, this land is not for sale." That night, under the starry sky of Bravo Valley, Nathan proposed to her, not with a flashy ring, but with a simple silver band that had belonged to his grandmother, a peasant woman who had taught him the value of the land and authenticity. But the defining moment of his transformation came months later, during a dinner in Mexico City. Elizabeth and Nathan had invited some of her old friends to see the remodeled original cafe in the Condesa neighborhood, now stocked with products from the estate and decorated in a style that blended rustic and elegant. During the evening, Claire, one of her more superficial friends, asked with a hint of disdain, "Elizabeth, darling, I really don't understand how you can spend so much time in the countryside. I'd go crazy without my spas, my shopping, my social life. How can you stand living among, well, so much nature?" A year ago, that question would have embarrassed Elizabeth, made her feel inferior or out of place. But now, with the serenity that only self-awareness brings, she smiled and replied, "It was in nature where I found who I truly am, Claire. Between earth and sun, I discovered that true elegance isn't in what you wear, but in how you live your life." The silence that followed her words was profound. Some exchanged uneasy glances, others genuinely reflected on what they had just heard. Nathan, beside her, gently squeezed her hand under the table, a silent gesture of complicity and pride. The end of their story was written when they completely remodeled the original cafe. They didn't put up a new sign or hold a grand opening. They simply placed a small wooden plaque by the entrance with the words, "Not all that glitters is gold. Sometimes it shines quietly between the earth and the sun." A year later, Cinnamon and Earth had expanded to 3 locations: the original, at the estate, the renovated cafe in the Condesa neighborhood, and a new one in San Miguel de Allende. All followed the same principle: the highest quality organic products, artisanal pastries, and an atmosphere that invited reflection and genuine connection. Elizabeth and Nathan divided their time between the city and the countryside, having found a balance that respected both worlds. She had learned to ride horses and enjoy long walks along the estate's trails. He had discovered the pleasure of classical music concerts and art exhibitions in the capital. The most important thing, both had learned that true love doesn't transform the beloved into someone different, but rather allows them to discover their authentic essence, the one that may have remained hidden beneath layers of social expectations and appearances. The woman she once judged for her hat and boots now served coffee with steady hands and eyes full of stories, knowing her greatest achievement wasn't her successful chain of coffee shops or her social status, but having had the courage to break free from the shell of prejudice to uncover the treasure hidden beneath the surface. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Elizabeth and Nathan has deeply moved you. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about personal rediscoveries and loves that transcend appearances. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this Mexican narrative that reminds us of the importance of looking beyond the surface, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity in different corners of Latin America. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance and then been surprised to discover their true essence? We'll see you in the comments.